Hello and welcome to everybody on Cloud Fitness. So this video is a very on-demand video where I am starting a play series on the Data Factory interview questions. So a lot of you have sent in emails to me, right, to make videos on Azure Data Factory and Databricks interview questions. So that is why I have already created a video of a playlist for Azure Data Factory, and this one is for the Databricks. So let's move ahead and see what are the questions that we can start off from this particular video, right? So the very first basic question that I have is, what is Databricks? So this question might be asked in the interviews just to understand how much you know Databricks. So you should be able to answer it really well, right? So when we talk about Azure Databricks, it is an Apache Spark based environment. That is what the very first thing that you should know, that it is an Apache Spark based environment. It is a collaborative environment where, when I say collaborative, it essentially means that you have your data engineers, you have your data analysts, you have your data science people coming in all together at the one place and working on the data, right? It is an Apache Spark based big data analytics service. When I say Apache Spark, whatever code that you write in Databricks, that is basically run on Spark, right? It is a Spark code that you write. Now, apart from that, it is a big data analytics service. It's not just the structured data that you can process. You can process semi-structured and even unstructured data as well in the Databricks. Now, the second thing is, that it supports multiple language, so it is not very much language bound. You can work on Scala, you can work on R, you can work on Python, you can work on SQL as well. So these are the things that you should definitely know about Databricks, as well as it can easily integrate with your other Azure services like your Active Directory, your key vaults, your storage accounts. If you have data in your storage accounts, you can directly go ahead, link it and use that data, right? So it is a very essential and useful SaaS offering. So in fact, let us go to the second question that is also very commonly asked, because when you are writing Databricks in your resume, what usually happens is a person who has worked on Databricks essentially would know about Data Factory as well. So this is a very common question, that what is the difference between Databricks and Data Factory? Because whatever code you write in Databricks, let's say you're trying to do a filter, group by, or anything, that can essentially be done in Data Factory, right? Or vice versa. So why do you need Databricks when it can be done in Data Factory? So you should be very clear. It is essentially a very, both are actually a different offerings. The very first difference is the purpose, right? The Databricks has a different purpose and Data Factory has a different purpose. Data Factory is essentially for orchestration, for the data flow, for the data transformation, for the code-free data transformation and orchestration. But when you talk about Databricks, I've already explained, it is an collaborative platform where multiple people can come in together. Data science team can come and they can train their models. They can train their models in Databricks. When you talk about data engineers, they can write a code solution. So code solution is actually not bad, because you have a lot of flexibility, with when you write your own code, which you don't get with the Data Factory, right? So that is essentially one of the reasons that most of the organization, when there is any kind of data engineering task or data engineering transformations that have to happen on the code, they prefer using Databricks rather than Data Factory. Data Factory is mostly, most of the organization they use for data movement and orchestration purpose. So this is the very key and major difference when you talk about Databricks and the Data Factory. And of course, when you talk about data processing as well, right? In Databricks, you can process not just your structured, semi-structured, or even your your batch data. You can easily use your streaming data as well. Though in Data Factory also you have an option to use streaming data, but live streaming is possible only in Databricks as of now, right? So even when you talk about data processing, Databricks has an advantage. But yeah, these are the two major things. Apart from that, there are cosmetic things that you can talk about, like you can say that Data Factory is a code-free ETL solution and those kind of things. But these two are the major differences that you should definitely cover. And then a very common question is, describe Spark architecture. So if you're working on Databricks, you should know Spark architecture, right? So I have already in fact explained about the Spark architecture in one of my videos. Let me check that out. So if you see this runtime architecture of Spark Databricks, I have already explained in detail regarding the architecture of Spark. If you want to know details on this, you can go ahead and you can just watch out this video as well. In this, I have explained everything about the runtime architecture of Spark, how everything works, and how your in fact I created this diagram to show the flow of the basically flow of whenever you write a query, what is the flow that happens in your data bricks. So going back to the PPT, if you see over here, right, when I talk about a Spark architecture, what essentially happens is you write a code. I'm actually trying to explain this in very short. If you want to have a very detailed explanation, you can watch that video. So when you talk about Spark architecture, you write your code. Whenever you write your code, you write it through Spark context. You write it on Spark context and with the help of driver program. Driver program actually, or you write it through Spark context. Whenever you must be writing code in Databricks, you would write that spark.rdd, right? sc.parallelize. So sc is basically Spark context. Right, so you create a driver program, and then behind the scenes, what happens is Spark driver submits the job, submits your code, submits your code to DAG scheduler. So when I say DAG scheduler is nothing but directed acyclic graph scheduler. So what it does is it essentially takes your code, what you have written, and it tries to create a logical and physical plan out of it. When I say logical and physical plan out of it, it tries to optimize your code and tries to create a plan out of it on how it will execute your code. Now, once it has created your physical and the logical plan, then what happens is it sends it breaks your code in form of tasks and your stages, right? It breaks your code in form of stages and tasks, and these tasks are actually sent to your executors or to your worker nodes for the execution purpose, right? And then from there, executors actually write your data to whichever location you have specified. And in between, cluster manager actually manages your all the worker nodes and the executors, right? So this is a very short introduction of how Spark architectures behave. You have your code, you write it through Spark context, you have your driver program, you send your code, then you have your cluster manager. Cluster manager tries to make sure that you have worker nodes ready, and it manages your worker nodes. Basically, worker nodes are nothing but a set of machines where your actual code will execute. Now your code is there, with the help of Spark driver, it is sent to DAG scheduler, which creates logical and physical plan out of it. Once it is done, it actually segregates your code in form of stages and tasks which are supposed to be executed on the executors. Then all those tasks with the help of task scheduler are sent to your executor nodes for the execution purpose. So this is basically a very short introduction of Spark architecture. And then coming on to the next question is, what is the maximum size of worker node that you have used? Now this is a very, very, very important question. In fact, the most important one, I would say. Now this essentially shows everything about how much you have worked on Databricks and how much you know about Spark. Essentially, this question answers everything. So when I ask or when anybody asks you what is the maximum size of worker node you have used, it shows how much data you have been using. It shows how good you are in configuring the cluster. It shows how much you understand the Spark architecture, right? So whenever this question is asked, you should not exceed the worker node configuration more than 64 GB. That is something that you should keep in your mind. What is the maximum size of worker node you have used? Essentially, it depends on your project as well, but most of the project, they do not need more than 64 GB of worker nodes, right? Because what happens is, if you increase the size of your worker nodes more than 64 GB, there is a garbage collection overhead which reduces your performance, and mostly you will not need that, right? You will not need more than 64 GB. After this, you can go ahead, increase the number of worker nodes, or you can increase the number of cores you have, and there are a lot of other optimizations to be done, but 64 is a cross check point, like more than 64 GB is actually not required. And in case if you want to know more about this, why in more than 64 and all, for that also I've created one video on how to select worker and driver type in Databricks. So if you go through this particular video, you will understand end to end how to choose a cluster, basically how you can go ahead, choose a cluster, and what cluster configuration best suits for each workload. But yeah, a straight away answer is 64 GB. If you want detailed answer of why, you can go ahead and check the video out. And then you have the next question is, how do you choose cluster configuration? So when I say how do you choose cluster configuration, again, this is a very important question, and it has, you can speak about it for almost in half an hour. But yeah, again, for choosing the cluster configuration, you should understand that whenever you're trying to do any normal ETL or ELT work, in that case, you should go for memory optimized clusters, right? After that, whenever you have some development tasks that you need to do and quickly check it out, in that case, always go for general purpose clusters. Then the third thing is, if you have a strong ETL task or ELT task which requires a lot of shuffle, it has a lot of joins, in that case, always go for storage optimized cluster. So these things you should always remember. These are the key points actually. In fact, I can actually go and show you. So whenever you are in the Databricks portal and you try to create a cluster, so let me try to create a cluster and in fact show you. If you go to the worker type or the driver type, you can actually see there is general purpose, there's general purpose, HDD you should never choose an HDD option. Then you have this memory optimize over here, and then after you have storage optimized, right? So these things you should always keep in mind that before attending any interview for Databricks. So this really makes sense that for any normal ETL workload, you should always use memory optimized, storage optimized for a shuffle intensive workload, because it has a disk attached to it, so it can easily speed up your process of any shuffle that is required. That is why you should go for a storage optimized ones in case of shuffle intensive work. So this is pretty much that I wanted to cover in this particular video, and thank you so much for being till here. Do let me know in the comment section if you have any issues, any doubts, and do remember to like, subscribe and share this particular channel. Thank you so much.